This is a clouds weather alert.
Good Sunday morning, everybody. Meteorologist Casey Cloud here in the Weather Center right now, giving you the latest information on our extreme cold. You're seeing these temperatures here right now, just so chilly. I hope you're bundled up here as we're looking at things and as we're tracking things. Just so important to do that here as we're giving you guys the very latest updates. Of course, we're just trying to stay on top of things here in the Weather Center because this is just extremely cold air here. Those wind chill values even colder than these numbers that I'm showing you. And I have that my thermometer there, that reading in the corner there in the bottom left per se, close to that. 22.4 is what I have in my air temperature. My wind chill is even colder. It's about 15 is what it feels like where I'm at. And you see 11 there toward Keystone. 11 in Gainesville there is what it feels like there as the air temperatures, the actual air temperatures, they're so chilly here too. Just 23 there at Keystone Airport, 21 in Gainesville, 19 in Williston, 19 there toward Valdosta, 19 up toward areas there around Dawson and Georgia. You're seeing more uniform temperatures than what we're used to seeing because of the wind. That's allowing for a lot of mixing to go on here, and that's really important to keep, just something, really in the back of your mind because it's a scenario here where maybe the city of Stark is about 5 degrees warmer than where I'm at in a more rural area in eastern Bradford. We're almost the exact same temperature though. We're at 22.4 here east of Stark. And as I go ahead and look here at the information, I know we're going to go ahead and see what the Weather Stem site has right now. Going to go ahead and pull that on up here, and it's a situation where it's 22.6. So that wind is allowing for rural areas, urban areas to be almost the exact same temperature. So, you maybe hear about the cold air. We had 18 here a couple weeks ago where I'm at east of Stark, but in town it didn't get this cold. So some folks, are thinking, well, it was 18, like a couple weeks ago, but actually, in your area it might have not been, and now you're at 22. And instead of like 25, 26, and maybe that's enough to cause some pipes to burst here, unfortunately. So, got to be very careful about that. Some of you might honestly be up here early this morning watching because you've had problems here overnight. So, I just got to be really careful, thinking about that as we're looking at things, as we're tracking things here. So, again, I'm just continuing to track all of this here in toward the weather center, this extreme cold. So again, we're just, giving, the very latest information out to you guys on this. Just something to be very, very mindful of, obviously. As again, you see how cold it is even in Central Florida there. I know all the crops there towards Central Florida could have some issues. I know precautions trying to be taken, but there's only so much you can do in some cases. You see mid-20s there around Orlando right now. That is extremely cold for them. It's been the coldest there in decades down there. I mean, look at, areas there in Volusia County, Daytona Beach in the mid-20s here. You get down, say you see Miami in the 30s, mid-30s down there. You have iguana issues in terms of some of those falling because they're just so cold. That causes issues when you get this cold down there because it's an environment that's generally not, seeing that too often. The wind chill values down there. Look how cold these wind chills are in South Florida this morning. It feels like the mid-20s around Miami. It feels like 19 in Clewiston. So, not what you want to hear, obviously, as we're looking at things and as we're tracking them here this morning. Just, something to be very mindful of here, obviously. You got to be paying attention here as we're giving you guys the very latest on all of that. It's just so important to be keeping an eye out here in this type of situation. You just really, don't want to be caught here, off guard in a scenario like this with these type of conditions. You walk out and you feel that cold air. You're even in South Florida, you probably want to have those gloves on. Definitely in North Florida. I mean, if you're out too long here, you could actually have like frostbite, something like that, or even worse because I know there are women's shelters open in a lot of zones here It's just so chilly, obviously, so dangerous. You see these wind chills in Polk County. It feels like 12 degrees this morning around Winter Haven. It feels like, again, just so cold in our area of Central Florida, Williston. It's 18 or 19 degrees there right now, 18.9 to be precise. But you have 10 degrees for that wind chill value there. We have 8 there in Bainbridge. That's what it feels like with that wind factored in because it's just blowing so much. We're at 22.4 here right now, but our wind chill's at 15 east of Stark. I mean, yeah, a lot of folks again have corn and that in terms of their wind chill values, but we're here looking at things that wind is just allowing for all that mixing here, obviously. And that's why it's so uniform. It's never really like this. Normally, we're way colder than everybody else in the night. We might kind of get back in that pattern. We might actually probably will be colder on that Sunday night going into Monday, even in some areas, as you get in other spots in the viewing circle. But, maybe not right in Stark, but here where we're at, we'll probably be colder than 22 tonight. In the eastern part of the county, more rural area, Bradford County. So, I mean, you see these wind chill values. This is what it feels like factoring in the wind and the temperature. It feels like 7 there in Tifton. Right now, it feels like 9 degrees in Albany. These are just, very impressive and not a good way in terms of those wind chill values. I mean, in Central Florida, in the Kissimmee area, it feels like 12 degrees right now. These are historic type of wind chill values. The temperatures in the more urban areas kind of are historic, I would say. But, where we're at, we're having the coldest we've been all year. I know it's very dry air there, too, and that's something we have to watch out for with the wildfire concerns. We had an issue in Interlochen yesterday, and we could have more concerns today. The wind's maybe not as strong today, and they'll start to slack off, but we're in a drought concern that's really starting to get worse here. We have some chances for rain midweek, but probably won't really be enough. As I'll get to here in just a moment. But just the air temperature into that Donna run this morning, then that Donna Marathon, and toward Jacksonville. Just, hope everybody's bundling up. For the runners, it might not be as big of a deal. Still got to be careful, of course. But, and it's dry, in terms of the air mass and the like, and just so cold. And, maybe people sometimes you're not aware that, you're having issues there because you just can't really feel anything. But for the spectators, you're just kind of maybe sitting around and it's a scenario where, you could end up having some big time problems here. If you're not bundled up properly, could have folks, suffer from some problems here along that route this morning there. So just got to be very careful with that as we look ahead in the timeline. Again, just, be very, very careful in terms of you wanting to make sure you bundle up maybe where at, gloves, just, jackets, maybe, underneath some layers there. I know just got to be really, really careful, really, really mindful of that here. I know it's so dry. We have these chapstick weather type of dew points. I don't see dew points around here very often like this at all. I know that's helping to kind of lead to the dwindling down of that snow flurry threat. A little bit higher numbers around Tampa, though. And believe it or not, they've actually had some of that flurry action down in that vicinity here even recently, but it's not as much in terms of like not really seeing accumulation like what we were kind of thinking based on what some of the model guidance is showing. We're talking about Thursday night. We're not really seeing that down there toward areas to the south as I throw this up here, but we do have a recent snow flurry report 5:48 a.m. there toward Pinellas County. We've had a bunch of them overnight, in these different areas. That's the most recent one coming up from the MP information. I know I put a report out when I was up in Waycross yesterday with the flurry accident, which I'll talk about here in a moment. I was up there yesterday. I put a report out up there as that situation was evolving in that part of the vicinity here in toward southeast Georgia, but still, very noteworthy, obviously, in terms of that aspect of things. So, again, that's the storyline there as we're looking at, as we're tracking. Again, these dew points are so low, and that is a cause for concern. Of course, as we see the actual temperatures, reminding everybody just tuning in to see that 22.3. I'm taking it's kind of like how they do in some of the basketball games, especially years ago, just kind of taking a camera shot of the thermometer live. So you can watch that live here on the air. I know it's not as dramatic of a difference as other, spots, sometimes are when we're more in a rural zone. This is the night where we're kind of mixing, so we're almost the same as everybody else. Some nights it's a big difference. You say, well, is the thermometer working right? Well, it is. And this kind of proves that even more so. We're almost at the exact same number when we have all this mixing here is in the city of Stark. But, other nights were, except for about Cecil Field, were way, different, about 5 degrees, maybe more than that even, because, it's in a more rural area, more open and calm conditions, a lot, no concrete around, so no city lights, things like that allow for colder conditions, but we have all the mixing, so they're colder than normally are in this type of setup. We're, warmer, but it's 22, so it's not that much warmer. You really just gotta be bundled up. You gotta really be bundled up here as we're looking at things and as we're tracking things. I know another thing we gotta be watching out for. I know power outages here in the state of Florida. We've had all that wind here, and PowerOutage.us there, PowerOutage.com this morning has Miami-Dade County at 2,791 customers in the dark here right now. They're not as cold as up here, but some of those areas don't even have heat, depending on where you are. I know that space heater risk, probably even more so downstate in some ways, and power, and so some folks don't have anything, to stay warm right now, and that's just such an anomaly for them. That's you see that maybe it's not as big of a deal up here, but down there that's a huge deal in terms of just how cold it is. We have in Palm Beach County 1,700 customers in the dark. Again, we've had this wind, and that's helped unfortunately knock out power in a few spots here, and it's not ideal conditions for that to happen at all. So cold, so any power loss can lead to houses getting very chilly quick. I know, speaking of power outages, this a week into that aftermath of the ice storm, pretty much in Mississippi and the like, there's still over 55,000 customers in the dark up there, and 39,000 or so, in Tennessee. So over 58,000 to be precise in Mississippi, over 39,000 in Tennessee, and that's just awful, and that is just so scary. You got to be thinking about the carbon monoxide risk for days, weeks. Now is what we're kind of getting into up there. I know as we're looking at more of our numbers here, we have Orange County and Orlando. We have 1,554 customers in the dark. We have Duval County, 1,387 customers in the dark in Jacksonville. In our area, of course, as we're looking at things, we have Brevard County, Space Coast, 1,294 customers in the dark. Hillsborough County, 1,227 customers in the dark. Flagler County, 1,139 customers in the dark. Volusia County, 1,049 customers in the dark. So kind of breaking that all down for you there. And of course, we have all this cold air in here. We've had a winter weather scenario. Let me turn the radar back on. I've had, kind of off here at points to look at things here, but we'll turn that on. I have it on high sensitivity right now, but you see all the snow they've had up toward the Carolinas. And we'll turn the sensitivity down just a little bit here as we're looking. You can see some of these areas there right on the North Carolina, South Carolina line, over a foot of snow. And that's just such a dramatic number. These areas generally, don't really see this. This is somewhat, though all winter storms are different, similar in some ways to the 1989 winter storm scenario. Of course, we had, significant snow in Jacksonville then. Not so much this time, but it did happen. And, had it in Jacksonville, had another spot in the viewing circle, including in Waycross there. And in fact, I was up there yesterday getting some video of that and experiencing what, ended up, even though it wasn't a lot, it's not, that impressive. If you're watching from up north, you think it's kind of funny, but it's the most impressive snow I've seen, in over 25 years, because the 2 times I've had it here, they were smaller flurries, and then I had it maybe at FSU in 2016. It was kind of iffy there under a light, and I had freezing rain and sleet. That was impressive. That was just winter storm in 2014, but 2016 was very, iffy. The other 2 times here in Stark, 2010 and last year, smaller than what I saw on Waycross. So let's go ahead and show you. I know going back to first few years there, going back to the 90s really, and maybe early 2000s period there, into Ward, Texas, is where I was seeing some of that snow earlier on. Nothing like some accumulation to get out there. Nothing like last year's accumulation of Waycross, but still a big deal. Let's take a look at this story now that I put together. On Saturday, I'm on the many places in South Florida that saw snow flurries for Waycross and Ware County. I was there around 4 p.m. to document them. Temperatures were in the mid-30s, but gusty winds made it feel like the mid-20s. Why not like the extreme conditions seen in the Carolinas? Areas like Gainesville and Rayford reported rare north central Florida flurries. I'm meteorologist Casey Cloud reporting with Clouds Weather. So yeah, definitely impressive there up toward Ware County and the Waycross area. Yesterday, of course, we're still seeing remnants, and the leftover of the winter storm blizzard-like conditions at points there in toward North Carolina. I know seeing some video reports last night. I mean, and still got some snow and some wind out there. I mean, these are some strong winds there right now, right there around Morehead City. We're seeing gusts about 50 miles an hour with snow. Still, it seems to be, coming down there. This is freezing fog, but it looks like, snow coming down. This visibility so low, probably because of the snow blowing. What an event there. At least it's not causing the power outages like, we had in the ice storm where they're still, despite it just being, a lot of, snow and wind, those power outages up there aren't even as bad as in Florida here this morning across the whole state. But, nothing compares to Tennessee and Mississippi. Even a week later, people are, probably starting to be desperate here in some ways. Over 50,000 customers still in the dark. 58,000 Mississippi a week after that ice storm up there that we were covering last week, and when we were so concerned in Ole Miss University, they're closed for a good bit. Last time I checked, it's another week that they're going to be closed there in the wake of the ice storm last week. So it's such a busy winter storm pattern here. I know you get these low pressures. At least these aren't tropical setups here in the July, August, September, October period. But this is a low pressure here, a winter storm. You have these pressure values, 980 millibars or so, and you have that on the map right now. So this is something where you have a lot of wind. You've had some coastal flooding concern and the like. Of course, water temperature is way cold here. This is not anything, anything close to tropical. It's just the idea of a low pressure here. That's the idea, and that is a comparison to be made. I know. By the way, we're gonna have sunrise here in about 28 minutes. We're out here east of Stark, and that's about right leading into that's about the time where you have the coldest temperature. We've got down to 22 this morning, 22.2 here, about 628. The lowest we're at, in terms of that minimum. We'll see if we get any lower. Now, usually 22.3 now. It's on the screen live, something I've never actually done before with a thermometer. Just showing the Davis Weather Station number live in the corner here as you're watching, as you're tracking here this morning, watching the meteorological scenario here as we give you guys the very latest here in this special report. We're in alert mode still. This cold is going to continue tonight. In some areas, it's going to be even colder. The wind chills won't be as bad, so that's good at least. But I mean, in the cities, it might not be as cold. You'll probably bursting weather, but in rural areas like I'm at here, east to Stark, we're going to have temperatures that actually could dip a few degrees colder, give or take. So we're at 22. I mean, it's possible we'll get 18, 19 tonight because you have the cold air mass. You have calming winds. Yes, as we look at it, during the day, it's still going to be blustery. I know it's only going to get in the lower 40s today. I know that Gator basketball game today on ABC. Folks are going to be bundling up going to that. I know they had flurries yesterday out there toward the UF campus, and they had a FSU as well. At this point, not as big of an anomaly at FSU than it is at UF. That doesn't happen very often in Gainesville at all. It doesn't happen much at FSU either, but it happened, with some actual snow last year. We had to throw it this year. Didn't really happen, but, just a lot going on with that. Of course, we had flurry reports across Georgia. We had flurry reports here, across north central Florida, quite honestly. Rayford, that I alluded to in the report there. I know Middleburg, we had reports out of there. We had reports toward the First Coast area, just a bunch of, reports there. Flurries, nothing, too crazy. Some videos were, probably more dramatic than mine in a few spots, but a lot of them were similar to what I showed you, even less, than what I was showing you in those videos here as we're looking toward north central and northeast Florida. So, again, it's just kind of, I know, looking at the maps yesterday, thought Waycross was the best move. It wasn't a situation where we're getting just a whole bunch of accumulating snow here in the local area, so we didn't need to do live coverage. We did not need to do that. We just had the stream going for the most part there. They're not to the front end of that. But it's a situation we just wanted to try to document some of that here in the field a little bit because we don't normally have that chance because things are too serious. Just to the north of our area, we had some decent accumulations though a few inches, give or take, in the vicinity of Savannah in some spots. I'll bet it's up 4 hours. And I was hoping it would show some of the local storm reports, but still, you can see how we had that snow around 4 hours ago. Not so much there now. And I'll put on our weather information now. This is not an accurate report as what I've seen around Miami. I know it says that, but apparently there's an issue with the sensor because other folks were wondering too. That would have been a huge deal. Don't think that's happened there since '77. If that would have been the case, but it hadn't happened there. That was a incorrect reading, it seems, on some sensors. But we have had flurries there, all the way, south of Tampa here. Quite a few reported that. We had some around, I believe, the Brevard County, Melbourne area. Earlier on, so just all sorts of flurry reports getting pretty far down the state here. All that wind, helping to bring that down, the cold air in. These are extraordinarily cold temperatures, record lows, for a good period. I mean, some of these air mass temperatures rivaling, we've seen. You have to go back to the 1980s. So it's more so central Florida this morning with these mid-20s. North Florida, we've had, at least in some spots, temperatures like this, and they're going back to Christmas of 22 there. We had temperatures cold. We had 2010. We had flurry acts and cold as well. So, yeah, a lot going on with that there as we're looking and tracking things. I know. Let me go ahead and see if there's any questions or comments. I know we're on early, so some of you might be watching on a replay after you wake up, or you might be watching just waking up wondering what's going on, how cold is it in my neighborhood. And I know in Stark itself is 22.6 at the Bradford County Sheriff's Office. Weather stem station there, and we're at 22.4 now, as you see it live on the screen there in the corner. As we're looking, as we're tracking, I know they had at the Bradford County Sheriff's Office the information out about a warming center there. On that Saturday night, going to close at 8 a.m. this morning, but reopen at 8 p.m. tonight, and then 8 a.m. on Monday morning there. I know that's going to close again as they're important to provide temporary relief from exposure to elements, according to their statement, associated with sub-freezing temperatures, and wind chills and chairs and restrooms are provided. That's in the Bradford County Sheriff's Office lobby at 945B North Temple Avenue. So, somehow getting this information and you weren't able to stay warm on that Saturday night. Well, Sunday night hit, another 12-hour period, 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. in Bradford County, 8 p.m. Sunday to 8 a.m. Monday. Just got to be bundling up, obviously, if you can, though, otherwise. And, obviously, I guess if you have power outages or something, that could be something to consider. Hopefully, we don't have that, too many places here. Let me double check our number to know this. Does not include the city of Stark Electric from what I've seen over the years. But I'm going to check Bradford. I see Electric has 100 customers in the dark. Bradford has none right now. They don't track the city of Stark on here. So I know Clay Electric's grid, there, are, let's see here, how many customers out according to Powder.us. 642 customers in the dark, and let's see where they're at right now. Just looking at my numbers here, I know it looks like we have those in Clay County here, so that's not what you want to see, obviously, anywhere in our area. We'll figure out what part of Clay County those outages are in here this morning. It looks like that's right there around Keystone-ish. I'm zooming in on my map, so looks like we have a few people in the dark there. Customers, I say a few, really, it's more than that when you have that many customers. One part there of southwestern Clay County, 434 customers affected, expected to be restored by 8:09 or so a.m. Customers, that could be, let's say there's 2 or 3 people in the house, that could be over 1,000 people without power and hard freeze conditions here, and the house will get cold. It'll be very cold very quickly. So don't want to hear that, obviously. All this wind hadn't helped with that. It hadn't helped with our wildfire concern either here. as we're looking and as we're tracking things. We had people had to be evacuated on interlocking there, in here in our area yesterday because of this wind and these dry conditions. And unfortunately, the drought monitor is not a fun picture right now. As we look and as we track things, you see an extreme drought here in parts of north central Florida. Something, with this cold, you don't think about it as much maybe, but with that dryness and with the wind, it was a problem yesterday. We have concern in Georgia too, but you see extreme drought there, parts of Bradford, most of Union, parts of Columbia, Swanee, Lafayette, Dixie, all of Gilchrist. You see pretty much all the Alachua, all Levy, and then parts of Marion involved, most of Marion involved in that. And then get into the Big Bend, you have more concern Leon and surrounding counties like Gadsden, Jefferson, and then you see parts, a little bit of Wakulla, and then parts of Liberty in there as well, and then severe drought around it. It's extreme drought. We really, don't want to be burning stuff right now. We got to get more rain. We need more rain very badly. And this is something, you think of the cold weather, you think of this, you think of snow flurries, you don't think of wildfires. I mean, not the case where I was, and, a lot of places, but some places, I'm looking for snow flurries, and instead, you might have been, I'm sure, seeing, ashes there in the air from wildfires instead, and the like. So, things like that, which is very concerning. Not what you want to deal with, obviously, and that can be a big problem in of itself. But you see that rainfall forecast, I know, because that can lead to more areas, flare-ups. But you can see here towards dark, only expecting about a tenth of an inch here over the next 7 days. This is not enough here. Not expecting more wintry precipitation, but other areas might way to the north. We'll see, but in the southeast and the like. But in terms of our area, it's going to be rain, and we need more than a tenth of an inch. Tallahassee area, a little bit more, quarter inch, maybe some areas getting closer to half inch or 3/4 in the far southwestern part of the Big Bend. But this is not enough here, folks. We gotta be really not wanting to burn. Need to have those burn bans in play here at this point. Some areas already have them. And this is something that, kind of even, catches me off guard in a way. I mean, I know about the wind and the dew points and the dryness we've been at, but you're thinking of this cold air and you don't really think of wildfires right off. But now we're starting to get that point where, if we don't get this rain, we're now in February. It's February 1st, and, Groundhog Day, and then, we're looking there at the calendar, Valentine's Day, and as the weeks, and, President's Day in there. Getting into March Madness and the like, with college basketball. And this is the time of year, unfortunately, where things really become more favorable for that concern. It's really important to be, making sure that brush around your house is, not in a spot there where wildfires can really, cause problems. You just got to be starting to think about that mitigation here, because otherwise we're going to, have problems, and it could happen. I mean, it happened some yesterday. All that when we had gusts over 50 miles an hour in Gainesville. Gainesville Airport, I believe, is 54 miles an hour. We don't generally have that kind of wind, but if we get like a line that falls apart or something out of the west, and then we get the push of wind from that, you could have the same idea, and it might not be as cold and either, which can help in a way to fight fires. With maybe for one, the firefighters in general. They're not going to be maybe as exhausted as quick as it would be in a summer day, but it's a situation here. You just got to be very mindful because it could be worse, and worse here as we look ahead with that. But I know we're always on top of things across our area, trying to give you guys the very latest on all the different platforms, whether it's Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, or Twitch. I'll go ahead and remind you guys what we're on. I know we, had that radar stream going yesterday here for a while. Of the flurry action here. We had an update at the beginning of that, and then we had that going. I posted a picture on Facebook and Twitter of that flurry action. One, example of it anyway, from Ware County, where Waycross is, in that area there, in the viewing circle. So, again, we were keeping tabs on that yesterday. Saw it all the way, on and off, all the way down to the line there. You were starting to get into Charlton County coming back, toward the Folkestone area and that general direction there. But Let's go ahead and if you're just tuning in here, I know it's 7:02. You see 22.2. That's on my thermometer live. My Davis weather station here, east of Stark in the rural area, but we have more mixing, so it's not as dramatic as like an 18, like we had a couple weeks ago, because the wind is making it uniform. So instead of being 5 degrees warmer right in town in Stark, they're the exact same, and that could be bursting pipes because that this is for in town areas. This is the coldest there in years, maybe maybe many years. I mean, Central Florida, just all these areas. The beaches, of course, the wind chill is terrible, there too, with so cold, but then the beaches you're having maybe pipes burst even. So this is, all area thing with the extreme cold warning here. And boy, it's the first one ever. Now we do have wind chill warnings that were issued before. That's just, we'll place the nomenclature, but this is something we don't deal with much. You really got to take it serious because you can have concern there pretty quick with these single digit, in some cases, or lower teen wind chill values there with that cold. It can lead to frostbite and the like here eventually. I know that sounds crazy, but you really got to be protected with this cold air in here. We're seeing again 22.3 on my weather station here east of Stark rural area in Bradford County. So again, just continuing to watch this extreme cold here as the situation evolves. Speaking of that, we did have, flurry accident. It was in the mid-30s yesterday up there. It was interesting watching going from about 50 right to the state line, Florida Georgia line. They're going into Folkestone and then getting into the mid-30s, and then a little while later, you have the snow come in there toward those areas like where I was in southeast Georgia. Let's go ahead and see that report again for folks just tuning in, just waking up on what I was talking about there. That flurry accident, seeing that in person there in Worth County, Georgia, in the Waycross vicinity. On Saturday, I'm on the many places in South Georgia that saw snow flurries for Waycross and Worth County. I was there around 4 p.m. to document them. Temperatures were in the mid-30s, but gusty winds made it feel like the mid-20s. Why not like the extreme conditions seen in the Carolinas? Areas like Gainesville and Rayford reported north central Florida flurries. I'm meteorologist Casey Cloud reporting with Cloud's Weather. So yeah, just really telling that weather story there about that flurry accident. I mean, we're heading a lot of places. We're still getting some of that potential. It wasn't as much in terms of actually getting accumulation toward the Tampa Bay area. But a lot of folks did see flurries here overnight down there. We had more dry air than we were, maybe anticipating down in that vicinity, though. Just not. We had the clouds show up on satellite. I'll see this here. Give me a second and I'll kind of shift this on over, but it show up on satellite, but it's a situation here where you don't end up really having them come into play. Some of it did come to the surface at points, but just not, necessarily coming into play there in some of the different areas. So, this is our covered area, but looking downstate, I know we did have flurry reports, a lot of them, but just not actually getting the accumulation. But you have, if you look real close, you see with the wind direction, you have the cloud formations, you get the lighter stuff, but you don't get enough of it to reach the surface. It ends up on radar too well. So, I mean, it still happened, and a lot of folks saw it, but more of a novelty and, no accumulation at all. I don't really think anybody in Florida saw accumulation officially. I know as we were looking around Dothan, we were watching some of that come toward Mariana earlier on in the day, and Tallahassee didn't have accumulation there and the like. So we had that chance to go up on us there. We talked about it right before that moved on in our update at noon yesterday at the beginning of our radar stream before headed out for Waycross and the like there in southeast Georgia as we were looking. I know watching that, Dothan, they had some of that on the, grassy surfaces, but not, road impact, their roofs and the like, based on what that's weather statement said. And our winter weather advisory got dropped from southeast Georgia County that we had it, out for because not enough to, constitute that because the accumulation wasn't enough. Brunswick had some here and there for sure there, in terms of the concern on radar. I don't know if it was actual official accumulation there or not, but saw more on radar lasting a little bit longer into the evening there. It was more visible. So, down toward Glenn County, we had Camden, Glenn, Brantley, and Pierce were the 4-hour under that winter weather advisory, but that got dropped. I know we had a winter storm warning in the north, more so winter weather advisory in the closer counties now. As I'll go ahead and put the radar back on, just so in that, you can see it better on the western side of the low pressure here. This is, we had that behind the front. You don't normally get that too much, a low there that causes, precipitation in this pattern, and then you have that behind the front. And that is something where it's a cold, cold front, not just the normal cold front. So that's how you can kind of get this to set on up here. See, in Tennessee, this wasn't on the modeling, but we have some snow there around Nashville and Huntsville. We'll watch to see if somehow we get some weird stuff to come together coming up in the timeline, down here, because these are low dew points to be getting that in. As we're looking and tracking things, but sometimes you get different formations. I'm not 100% sure on this. Could be some type of what you call lake effect snow. We've had some of that in the wake of the cold air lately out there because it's not showing up in the modeling, but I know we have had some of that Gulf effect snow, but not enough to show up on the radar mode here. We did have, reports here and there downstate. I know I go back 4 hours, you don't really see it on this mapping here, but again, I showed you some of those, or at least one of the MPN reports. I'll just go ahead and take some of this off real quick, and then we'll just loop some reports. It should show a few in here, I think. Maybe not. Maybe not in the last 4 hours as much. Okay, there you go. Yeah, that's what I was hoping for to show. You see how it's showing trace per se, or, just really little. More just a report of flurries and clear water there in Pinellas, and then that was around just before 5 a.m. in Ruskin there, just before 5 a.m. at the Weather Service office, but again, no accumulation. So that's kind of the storyline there. So I just kind of looped that around. So some of those they did them as OSR. Sometimes don't do that up here as much, but it's so rare down there. They're going to document that in the books. And they had a lot more still in 77 down there, and the like. It wasn't as much as we thought down there by any means, but, we thought more banding would set up where it actually get some accumulation. I mean, I set up to a half inch is what I was thinking in a few spots. Didn't have really any accumulation, but some of the models were actually on 3 inches. So didn't go with that either because that sounded and did not look quite right. It was outlandish how it sounded, but you kind of get the idea here. As we look, you see some of the snow amounts showing up here in the Carolinas downstate, Charleston an inch, but some areas to the north, way more than even the 5 inches, some areas around a foot or so. I know they had wind, snow, and still some of that around Myrtle Beach to some degree, seeing some of that concern, and then, that's something. And then down here around, Morehead City and the like, seeing some of that wind really come into play, tropical storm force like winds there in toward that area. So that is very much so noteworthy as we look back at some of these local temperatures again. Dixie County, Cross City this morning, you're at 19 degrees. You're 19 there at the Valdosta Regional Airport there in Lowndes County. This very chilly air for sure. I mean, in Central Florida, you have 24. And Kissimmee, that really never happens in Osceola County. Just right there, some of the coldest air in decades, and rivaling that. If it's not, I don't have the exact records there, noted it, but just if it's not quite to the record numbers, I mean, then it's one thing. But if you just a few degrees colder, give or take, if it's not there, then it's the coldest air since the 80s, the 1980s. So I know we had some of the coldest air ever the day of the Challenger explosion, which happened 40 years ago here, just a few days ago, the anniversary. The disaster there, Cape Canaveral and the like. Some of the coldest air that morning, and then you had that tragedy set on up, and so that's that seems to have been a contributing factor in all that there 40 years ago. But as we're looking and as you're tracking things, and I was looking at some of these numbers, you see 19 Williston and Levy County here. These are just so, cold, temperatures here that we're dealing with, that we're tracking. As we're giving you guys the latest on this extreme cold warning here this morning. Just I hope you're bundling up here, obviously. It's our first one in some of the spots in our viewing circle, per se, and getting downstate especially, because it used to be called a wind chill warning not that long ago, but still, these numbers are even colder than what we've seen in a long time, regardless of that, in terms of the nomenclature. I know I know. I'm surprised they're even saying this. And then the statement says they think it could get down in some areas of the wind chill as low as a 1 this morning in our area, or at least in the Jacksonville areas here from the Weather Service. But I know, freeze warning, hard freeze tonight again. Got to protect those plants, pets, pipes, people, pools, and watch out for fires, predator fire safety. If you didn't do it already, some of that stuff you're gonna have problems anyway. If you didn't protect the pipes this morning, but coldest in years in some areas in town where we're at, we actually had 18 a couple weeks ago. But I'll read some of this from the Weather Service. The dangerously cold wind chills as low as 0, in theory, could cause frostbite on exposed skin in as little as 30 minutes. I haven't seen that type of reading. Let me just pull these up here because, may have got a little colder in some of these. But yeah, we're not seeing anything lower than 7, which is still terrible. But not, I think I said as low as 6 the other day, and that's about what I would think there. But very cold temperatures can lead, I'm just reading what it says here in the statement, very cold temperatures, though, can lead to hypothermia or prolonged exposure. Appropriate actions to be taken to ensure tender vegetation is that, and outdoor pets have adequate protection from the cold temperatures. And then young children, the elderly, and the homeless are especially vulnerable to the cold, so it's very important to take measures to protect them. And I hope you did because, now tonight's still going to be cold. Some rural areas actually could get colder. A lot of the areas in the cities, not as much because we won't have that, as high wind. So, in the city, you might be, let's say, I'm just going to throw out some numbers here. Where we're at, we might get to 18 tonight, but in the city of Stark, we might get to like 25 because the wind will be up. They got a 22 this morning there. We got a 22 here east of town. So that's kind of what I'm going with saying here. It's going to be cold tomorrow morning going, out to work and school. At least it's Sunday, so that helps a little bit to mitigate some of this. Less people working with some people still having to be out and about. And of course, church services later on this morning. A lot of folks heading out of those. But just dressing layered, including a hat, face mask, and gloves. Depending on what in some cases, I know some folks don't want to wear all of that, but it still can be very important. Just dressing layered and hat, face mask, gloves recommended. When you're going outside, according to the statement here, and use caution when traveling outside. Wear appropriate clothing, a hat, and gloves, and then keep pets indoors as much as possible. Make frequent checks on older family, friends, and neighbors. Ensure portable heaters are used correctly. Do not use generators or grills inside. Take steps now to protect tender plants here from the cold and to prevent water pipes from freezing, wrap or drain, or allow them to drip slowly. So again, this is some concerning cold here that we've been alluding to as we're looking at things or tracking things here. We're at 22.2. That's the live reading off my weather station outside here, east of Stark, and in actually town itself. They're at, let's refresh the number here. The Bradford County Sheriff's Office 22.4. So, normally it's a big difference because we're more rural. When the winds are calm, the sky is clear. You have, quite a big difference in rural areas and urban. But because of all this wind, all this mixing, it's just a situation where everything's almost the same as we're tracking things with these readings. So, again, I just got to be very mindful of that. I know I have some clouds around here as well. As we're looking at things, but, there is some of that clearing, and then, as we're looking ahead, we're going to be seeing, tonight, it's going to be, again, getting so cold, and then during the day, we're going to get into the lower 40s here. We're almost right there at sunrise now. We're at 7:16 sunrise here east of Stark is about 2 minutes away, so we probably about the coldest we're going to get here for that overnight low, and, when we're kind of confident now we're wrapping this update up, I would think here, unless there's any pertinent news I need to get to in terms of some breaking weather stories. But again, this is some colder. I know the Weather Service office is probably sending out statements here in a little bit. I'll probably off by then. I'll say do it real quick. But what the lows this morning in certain areas here, they have to get it together. Take a little bit. But, around 22.2 here east of Stark. It's been pretty steady at that. In fact, here, as we're looking and as we're tracking things, as we're giving you guys that latest information here, just trying to be very mindful, obviously, of what we're doing with here. Just trying to be, updating you guys obviously here on the weather scenario. Uh, we're just trying to be very vigilant on all that. I'm just checking some of the different platforms, see if there's any, like breaking weather news. Of course, we did have a few power outages here this morning, which we have, we never like to see, obviously. We never like to see. Let me see how we're looking on the Clay Electric map. 673 customers in the dark right now on their grid. In terms of the counties, let me click on this. So we have 668 customers out in Clay County. Just very small, 1, 2-ish in Putnam, Columbia, a lot to things along those lines here this morning on the Clay Electric grid. And that's kind of the storyline there. I know in the state of Florida right now, Paradise.us has Polk County now 5,530 customers in the dark. See how cold it is down there? That's not great at all. Orange County's at 4,554. Most of this because of the wind we had. Some of this, I don't know, the cold, if we had precip, I guess that could do some issues, just some things, cause some issues. And then, I know, looking, just the numbers in Jacksonville, a little over 3,000 customers in the dark. In our coverage area, Marion County is now at 2,466 customers without electricity here this morning. Paradise.us telling that story as I'm looking at that behind the scenes. So, again, I know, just trying to keep you guys, in the know here this morning, per se, in the weather center. So, just trying to be mindful. I know it wasn't the type, of snow they had up north by any means in Myrtle Beach, like what they had up there, or, in eastern North Carolina, or even around Charlotte, I know. But it was still something yesterday with the snow flurries. Let's just remind people that are just waking up, just tuning in, what we were tracking yesterday, like around Waycross and Ware County. I'll go ahead and take a look back at some of that flurry activity that, I was tracking there in Rook County, Georgia. It's the biggest flurry action I've seen over 25 years. I've been here in Florida since 2000, since South Georgia there yesterday, but, since I've been back here and the family's been back here in Florida. We were in Texas for a period, my first few years, and had snow out there more than this. It could have been more than this, but, I haven't seen snow, to this level, even though it's not that much compared to what it was out there. So I haven't seen flurries this big, since I was very young, since I was, a child, just getting into like kindergarten and the like. So it was interesting for me here to see this for sure. On Saturday, I'm on the many places in South Georgia that saw snow flurries for Waycross and Ware County. I was there around 4 p.m. to document them. Temperatures were in the mid-30s, but gusty winds made it feel like the mid-20s. Why not like the extreme conditions seen in the Carolinas? Areas like Gainesville and Rayford reported north central Florida flurries. I'm meteorologist Casey Cloud reporting with Cloud's weather. So I know we were looking for some of the flurries downstate. We've had some of that, but it could have been a lot more down there. I know Tallahassee ended up getting some flurries. We only had them in a 30% chance going into all this, but ended up getting some of that. We talked about raising that chance right before it happened there yesterday afternoon as I was coming into toward Tallahassee. So just interesting to talk about all that there as we're looking at things, as we're tracking things. I know, in fact, just for people tuning in here, I'm going to go ahead and loop that video. I'll just talk over it now instead of, using the actual report audio there that I went, with that into that. And, of course, I wrote that script and the like for that and put that together. But we'll just go ahead and use the video from that now, and I'll talk over that as we're looking at things and as we're tracking things here. Again, just so interesting to see as we're looking out there in southeast Georgia. I mean, you see that flurry accent on my jacket there. A couple of them had another picture I shared similar to that. You see some of that on the road. This was right before we got, out of Ware into Charlton, heading back. And, radar was silver doing it just a little bit compared to what really happened. But, with all that white and gray. But we had some of that here, and that was interesting to see even some in north central Florida. But this is back up in Rock County, and then it's looping again. But I know we're getting some different reports and of just all sorts of different wind gusts here that Weather Service in Jax has put out here. And, that's, something we're It was windy out there for sure. Those flurries in there, and that wind chill's so cold. But Gainesville had a gust of 54 miles an hour yesterday, 3:52 p.m. There at the Gainesville airport area. They had a gust of 43 around, but now some tropical storm wind gust around here. They're having some of that with the actual blizzard-ish conditions there in the Carolinas. With all the heavier snow, not just flurries, but something much more noteworthy, much more impactful up that way with closer to the low pressure up that way there for sure. There's still some winter storm warnings up in toward that area in place. So definitely worth noting there. I know not a blizzard warning there. We have one in Alaska, I see, but that's what you expect. But in the Carolinas, you don't expect winter storm warnings. Augusta, Georgia, as well. Still, they got a good bit of snow there. That part of the state, a lot more than what this was in Waycross, but still, this is very noteworthy. Seeing that flurry, you saw it on the jacket, a couple of them there. It's really, and then again, a Doppler perspective, you see some of the METAR reports and then the radar. Again, I'm overdoing a little bit, but you see all the wind reports here popping up as well. All that gusty wind activity. So, again, just very noteworthy there for sure as we're looking and as we're tracking. So, you see that, and I'll go ahead and move away from that and pop back up the radar and really just talk about the temperatures here at this point in time. I'll put the radar on higher sensitivity, but you can see these temperatures down the latest updates now. Lake City's at 21 degrees. We're talking about some of these areas, not just at these sites at the airport, but right in town. That can cause those pipes to burst and freeze up. These are right in town, right in, where you generally have all the concrete keeping things warmer. It's not happening because of all that wind, and that's probably causing pipes to burst here and really be a problem, really being a problem. You have 21 degrees there in Gainesville, 23 in North Keystone, 21 right now, Jacksonville Cecil Field Airport, 21 around Hurlon Airport, 21 there again around the White House Naval Outlying Field in Jacksonville, 23 at Jacksonville International Airport, 23 there Fernandina Beach, 24 Mayport, 22 Palm Coast, 21 Ocala, 18 in Williston right now. That wind chill, it feels like 10 degrees there. Cross City and Dixie County is 18 degrees. It feels like 9.3, which, that's just so cold. It's 17.6, actually, but that's rounded up, of course. And then you have 20 degrees in Perry, 22 in Tallahassee. You have 20 there in Bainbridge, 20 degrees in Albany, and I'll shift over to the wind chills on the screen. You have 8 for that feel like factor in Tipton right now in Tift County. You have Douglas there, 9 degrees for the wind chill. You have 9, what it feels like they're not far from the water in Cross City and Dixie County there, and 11 in Flagler County with those wind chill values. And our wind chill isn't as bad here. Now, part of that's because our wind numbers don't read as high because our wind center's a little lower. The temperature numbers are really good on this. The rain gauge numbers are really good, but I have to keep it at a certain height for those to be a little bit better. So the wind numbers are a little lower. So I only had our wind chill at 19. It was like, I think I said 15 earlier on because we had a little bit more wind in there. But, definitely still, it plays a factor some, but still, it's just so cold. You got to bundle up here, bundle up. You still see 22.2. We haven't really started to rise much on that. It was 22.1 at 718 for the low now. Here east of Stark in the actual air temperature, department. These are your dew points. So dry of air, chapstick weather for sure. But yeah, you see these are the actual air temperatures, and I'm alluding to that here as we're looking at our barometric pressure rising some 1,024 millibars there as we're seeing, that wintry weather, that the small flurry activity move on out of the picture as we're looking and as we're tracking things here. So again, something I'm seeing on the radar. I don't know if this is just ground clutter or something, or it could actually be something, but it's starting to show a little bit more on here. At least I'll throw this up because I don't see the report yet to back this up. Right at sunrise, we're seeing some of this blue one right around, Tampa area, down east of Bradenton. That could just be the ground clutter pattern. Maybe we're starting to get some flurries there because they're not, it's so dry, but right at sunrise, you just never know. Some of the models were showing that maybe we'll get, last round of flurries down there in west central Florida. It's not out of the question, but it didn't materialize as much as it could have. But a lot of places got some, just not accumulation though. I mean, one of the models that had the idea going, actually, the NAM high res, I believe it was at 3 inches for some of these areas of snow. I went with about half inch. I thought it was going to happen like that. That's not going to happen at this point, but something that probably not going to get any accumulation anywhere down there, but still they had flurries in a lot of spots, and that's something that doesn't happen every year, even really every decade down there, and that's a big deal to see, obviously. So, and on 77 they had, way more now than that. We had way more here around Stark in 77 in Bradford County. I'll see some old family photos of that here, as we'll look at things and as we'll track here. That was the 77 event I'm alluding to. I know all these different events, we had 89 event that was similar in some ways for the Carolinas, some of the worst, and in the cold air, some of that, compares in some ways to that too. So interesting here as we're looking and as we're keeping you guys up to date on all this with the weather scenario. I know, all these different precip types we actually, had again. It was just snow because it's so cold. The different layers, and then, we have a freezing there around Waycross, which, that's just how it can be there sometimes when you have the layers above cold like that. Sometimes you have more mixing going on, but it's just kind of, varies here in these type of situations as we're looking and as we're tracking things. I know in terms of some of these readings, in terms of that forecast, I don't have a full 7-day for you guys in here. I don't have that in here, but low 40s today for the highs. That's around like Stark, and tomorrow into the low mid 50s, some frost, and with the wind down now, that's gonna lead to that more. I haven't looked at the cameras here, but my guess is because it was so windy, you'd have some more trouble getting frost compared to tomorrow morning. Monday night, you're gonna have that concern here. We looking here Tuesday night, you're seeing numbers start to maybe get above freezing, and by Wednesday we're towards 70 degrees, and then rain, maybe a storm Wednesday night, and then we start to get maybe closer to that freezing mark or a little below again by Thursday night. Not extreme cold, but just below that, give or take, Thursday night, and maybe 60s or upper 50s there for Friday. So real quick, what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna leave this up. I'm just gonna come back about 30 seconds. I can look out the window and see if there's frost right now. So I'm gonna do that. And I'll be back here with you guys in about 30 seconds or so. Bear with me. Back with you here. Not really seeing that. It's just kind of that grayish look at the grass, at least the part I looked at there out the window. So just kind of, telling that story, all that wind, that's what I was alluding to, but we're not going to have that tonight. So frost will be more prevalent, as we're looking for that Sunday night here. And we could actually get colder than 22 in our rural spot here east of Stark for that Sunday night. So again, that kind of tells the story here as we're looking at things, as we're tracking things here in toward the weather center. So again, just trying to keep you guys up to date on that. Just trying to keep you informed with the latest. I know we're just trying to give you all that information. Again, just so cold, winds, 9-10 miles an hour. That wind, that's what we're getting on our center. It's only about 7 feet up. So obviously some areas getting a lot more wind than that as we're looking at things and as we're tracking things here. As we keep you guys up to date. I mean, that wind coming in from the northwest there, just bringing all that chilly air in. We had all that flurries in there, as we were talking about here yesterday, and definitely something to be cognizant of, in terms of the novelty aspect, but not impactful here, really, in the area. We thought a few counties might have some impacts up in southeast Georgia around Brunswick. I really didn't see too much of that. I mean, it's possible if you had enough of that, it could have been, it could still be an icy bridge or two in our areas up there, but we don't have the winter weather advisory because there wasn't as much of that concern lingering. I know Sarah watching Tampa feeling like 22, she says there in North Tampa. I know, yeah, this is wind chill values, so cold. It's very rare down there as we're looking at things and as we're tracking things. I know, and just keeping an eye on the weather situation here on this Sunday morning. Just you see how cold it is down there. I know. Just looking here at some of the different numbers, it's so chilly. I mean, you get a little inland, a little further inland, you see that it's almost, closer to that 10-degree wind chill mark. We're closer to the bay there, and closer to 20, or even above that there as you're looking toward Tampa Bay and the like here this morning. So again, just looking at all that information on the wind chill number, that's what this graphic is showing you guys right now. So again, just something to be, alluding to here, obviously. I know they didn't get, snow really to accumulate down there. I know they had reports like Inverness and all sorts of places down around Tampa, but, didn't have it accumulate in Waycross either, but still it was a pretty sight there yesterday to see. I saw it up there and just wanted to see that video one last time here before we wrap it up. Hopefully our thermometer numbers start going up here pretty soon. Here you start at 22, well, back to 22.2. Well, it's 22.3. I know we have looking at stuff here. The full moon kind of helped eliminate some stuff at night, by the way, with the flurries and the like, but just, interesting to look at everything here with all that and with the radar that was during the day. When I was looking at that, I wanted to kind of do that more during the day, though, so you could see that better. But, be able to get a good video of it, and that's what we did here at Cloud Weather. But you got to be bundling up. You got that, thought process that you were concerned with the drought here, too. Let me see you guys that again if you're just tuning in. Because it's been so dry, we had that wind around, had a few power outages and the like. That can be an issue too, with the down power lines. If, that's the case in some of these areas here with this. And this drought, that was not what we want to see, because this is going to be, if we don't get the precip, we're going to have big problems here. We have a severe drought in some spots. Really, pretty much everybody actually in our area says at least that, but some areas have an extreme drought, and the rain only about 1/10 of an inch here for the next 7 days. So a real problem with that. Tallahassee, you see there, 1/4 to 1/2 inch, a little bit better. They have some of that concern, but you see down toward McCulloch County, maybe a little bit more of that precip, at least. They had flurries reports down there, even around Copperfield yesterday in some spots, looking at some of that information. So that was kind of interesting to see here as we give you the latest. I know we have that, looking at the temperature right now, still at 22.2 here east of Stark. It's going to struggle to warm up today, but we should start to see that number go up here now that the sun's coming on up. Get some of that heating at least, but only in the lower 40s. But we're putting that number live here. It's an actual camera on that here this morning, doing things a little bit different. Never done anything quite like that here. It's like how you see some of the basketball games over the years. You get a camera on that and you put that in the corner for like a clock there as you're like counting down the minutes in a game and the seconds in a game. But that's how it used to be done more so years ago, but sometimes still done like that. In some instances, even high school games broadcast like that. Sometimes even college games here and there, NFL in a backup scenario. To do that. Super Bowl a week away, by the way. That out in California out there, and that'll be Seattle against the New England Patriots. That'll be something there to watch. And today, the Gator basketball team has a game. It is coming up this afternoon on ABC. And it's going to be chilly for that. I know FSU's been doing well in basketball, winning 2 in a row. I guess the cold weather's working out. They've been playing the California teams this week, and they beat Cal and Stanford. So, great job there for Luke Loud, starting to maybe turn things around a little bit. It's his first year. But Alabama's coming to Gainesville, the defending champ, the Gators, in college basketball. 1 o'clock, it's going to be so cold. People heading out of that game. So keep bundling up. Even more cold in Tallahassee, where there were flurries yesterday. Flurries in Gainesville yesterday reported, flurries at FSU and UF both. I know, seeing the reports, we don't get that very often. Nothing impactful, but fun to see, obviously, as we're looking and as we're tracking things here in toward the Weather Center. Again, looking there, you can see these single-digit dew points are dry, and that's a concern as we've talked about here. And then just kind of looking at everything, tracking everything here to snow accent, toward eastern North Carolina. Just so windy and snowy up there, blizzard-like conditions up there at least. See our temperatures close to home, 18 swell warning, extreme cold warning, 18 in Cross City, 18 in Williston, 19 there in Lowndes County and Valdosta. And then the wind chill values here, you see some of these spots closer to the single digits. 9 there at Cross City Airport. We have a situation where, let's look at our number here in Stark again, just in terms of the weather stem site. They're at 22.3 as well, matching our temperature. Again, all that mixing of the wind, you don't ever really get that. And their wind's at 6 miles an hour right now. They had a gust in the last 10 minutes to 12 there. I know we have, just interesting, information in regards to that, but don't normally get the same number exactly there, but it's just, normally it's a big difference because in the town, you have the concrete and you have the lights, and normally because the wind's calm, the difference is pronounced instead it's the exact same number. So now here, maybe not the coldest night of the here in rural eastern Bradford County, of the season, but in town it's the coldest night in multiple seasons here, multiple years, and that's causing pipes to burst, I'm sure, here in some spots. I know folks are going to be busy, the plumbers and, like probably heat, and AC, type of folks there. There's different companies will be very busy here, obviously dealing with the heaters, that aspect of things with the units, but you kind of just can continue to see, look at some of the numbers in central Georgia, mid-teens, and some spots, or at least, the stories we're looking toward, like areas there just northeast of Savannah, or northwest of Savannah, excuse me, and in Augusta, mid-teens there in that vicinity, as we're looking, going west there on the interstate around, it looks like areas there like Greensboro, Georgia, 16 degrees, and, Athens, University of Georgia, they had snow yesterday, and it feels like 1 degree there. It feels like below zero in parts of Atlanta this morning with the wind chill numbers. Look at that. And some of these areas in Mississippi, they're still without power. Over 50,000 out without power, according to Power.us here a little while ago, a week after the ice storm there. And that's really bad. That's really bad because, all these temperatures are extraordinarily cold. A real problem. Some of these are more rural areas too. But I know in the state of Florida now we're up to 28,944 customers in the dark one. In some cases it's the coldest night for folks in years and they don't have power. But 4,600 out in Orange County around Orlando, 3,866 out in Polk County around Lakeland per se, that vicinity. Almost 3,000 out here in our area around Jacksonville and Duval County. Ocala's in Marion County, that county almost 3,000 in the dark. Miami-Dade County, 2,709 customers in the dark, mainly because of all this wind here. Some of this could be because of the just the situation here too, where we've had just the cold, having some impacts on things. But you look at Brevard County over 1,000. Palm Beach County over 1,000. Flagler County in our area over 1,000 customers in the dark. Southeast Florida, we looked there. We had the iguanas having issues falling, getting stoned by the cold, and you're almost at freezing there around the Miami Executive General Airport, which really never happens. Look at that. We're right in West Palm. We're below freezing in West Palm Beach this morning, the actual air temperature. That never happened. Damaging plants, no doubt, down there. And the wind chill, it feels like 20 degrees in West Palm Beach there this morning, which is extraordinarily cold. 16 around Stewart, what it feels like there. 15 there in Okeechobee County. Clewiston's at 19. That's what it feels like right now. These are some of the coldest wind chill values we've seen in decades in some cases. 29 is what it feels like around Fort Myers. I know the wind directions help to get the East Coast colder down here than the West Coast here. As we're looking at things, have the warm waters area, the land air kind of going to the East Coast, and that's why it feels like 13 there in Melbourne. You see inland now, of course, there, it's similar as you're looking at certain spots, but it's 12 is what it feels like in Kissimmee right now. 13 in Orlando for your wind chills. Back to the actual air temperature. This is what determines if things, burst in terms of your pipes or not. Once you have below 27, that's when some folks say different. Some folks say closer to 20. And it gets worse there, but below 27, that's when you really have a hard freeze and your pipes start really having problems. And a lot of folks that don't get this right in cities, even in Central Florida, they're getting it this morning, and they could end up, having their pipes burst here, unfortunately. So that's very problematic here, obviously. Hopefully you're dripping that water, running that water, keeping those, well insulated and the like. You see Nassau County, low mid-20s for the air temperature. We have that run there the Donna Marathon this morning. I hope people are bundling up for that here as we're looking out there, because this is some terribly cold air here this morning indoors. Some of these different neighborhoods. Definitely something to be alluding to for sure as we're looking and as we're tracking things here. I know a Women's Center open again tonight in Bradford County from 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. I'll move the map back down here. We're talking about at the, as I get the details up here, the Bradford County Sheriff's Office lobby, 945B North Temple Avenue. And the shelter's closing at 8 a.m. this morning. The center, Women's Center per se, but the Women's Center is going to be activated again tonight based on information to provide temporarily, type of, relief. We're talking about, for those type of situations here. Temporary relief. I know it's been on a while, so I'm wrapping it up soon. I'm hoping for this number to go up a little bit. It's just with that wind, it's not, it's going to be so cold. Just want to see these numbers are pretty much at bottom out of the lows, but they're not really going up much. Still at 22 here, and we're 20 minutes past sunrise, 25 minutes past sunrise east of Stark. But yeah, 945B North Temple Avenue, Stark, Florida, Bradford County Sheriff's Office lobby, Women's Center open again tonight from 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. It's activated to, provide temporary relief from exposure to elements associated with sub-freezing temperatures and wind chills, and chairs and restrooms are provided. So that's from the Bradford County Sheriff's Office page. Other places have that open. I can't go over all of our counties. So it would just take too much time. At least it's in a day where people, there's Sunday school, but, the public schools is not something where people are having to get out on the bus for the most part here this morning and have to wait at the bus stop. But tomorrow morning, the rural areas could actually be colder. We're at 22 on this number on my Davis weather station. That's what I have plotted. It's not changing a lot. The wind's mixing around, and but tomorrow morning we might be at 18 or 19 here, where the town is in town. It's about the same as 22 right now. It might be 25, 26 if the winds are dying down. It's just that big difference here as we're looking. Or let's say they actually get all the way down. Let's say they do make it down to 22 in Stark. Well, that might get us even colder here in our rural area if the winds really die down. That might get us down to like 16 or 17 degrees. It's not impossible here. Just the overall differences here as we're looking and as we're tracking things. That's something to be aware of for your Sunday nights. So, for some of us in maybe the cities with the urban areas, helping us out most nights, you might have had your worst now, where the more population is, but some areas haven't, It's possible we got our coldest air, since I've had this weather station. Started keeping these records here in 2021. We had that a couple weeks ago at 18, 17 point of, I guess it was 5, something like that on the weather station there. And rounding up to 18, it's possible we get a number lower than that tonight to be the coldest we've had since keeping records at the beginning of 2021 on the Davis weather station. So definitely worth noting here for sure. Keystone Airport there in southeastern Bradford, 23 degrees there right now. That latest number is from about 10 minutes ago. It feels like 12 degrees there, according to my information, 11.7. Gainesville, it feels like 11 degrees there. It feels like 12 in Lake City. It feels like 9 in Williston. Just so chilly. I know as we see the actual air temperatures, 18 for Williston, 18 for Cross City still, 19 for Perry. Just extremely, extremely cold air here as we're tracking things. 19 in Dougherty County and Albany, 22 in Waycross there in Ware County where I was yesterday, looking at the snow flurries and that snow accent. And then you just zoom out here. All the way down state. Look how cold it is on the East Coast, all the way down. Usually the air temperature just freeze toward Port St. Lucie and Stewart there, 28 there, 25 toward Okeechobee County, 27 in Sebring, and actual freeze, and pretty much toward a hard freeze there in Clewiston, even right at that mark of a hard freeze, the 27 mark. And then wind chills here. It feels even colder with that wind factored in. Some of these winds here, I know you may not know how to read some of these little indicators, but we have gusts, 22 knots there on the Miami Opelika Airport there. So That's getting up there. Not quite tropical force, but some of that is tropical force here, at the eastern coast of North Carolina as the snow action is retreating, but still in play. Blizzard-like conditions in eastern North Carolina, the Outer Banks this morning, with that snow, blowing snow, and some areas getting, over half a foot. Some areas more like a foot as we're looking up that way. Augusta's getting a good bit there in eastern Georgia as well. So. Okay, we're at 22.4. We've tried to think about the cold air enough. I know we aren't really rising much. I think we're going to start. The sun's bright and out now, looking out, just looking, seeing it come in there here where I'm at. And, let's just start to see these numbers go up soon. We should generally have been, bottoming out here. Now we should start to gradually, very, very slowly go up with some of these numbers. So that's kind of the storyline here for now. Again, thanks so much for tuning in. Thanks so much for trusting me here with this. We're going to wrap it on up for right now with this live updated special report here on this Sunday. We'll see if we do another one of these tomorrow morning. I know it won't be, even though we might actually get colder, we're right east of Star. We may keep a temperature thing running. We'll see. It's just the winds won't be as high. So the wind chill alert, just have to see what the criteria is for certain alerts and the like and different areas and, how that kind of plays out. But we'll actually be colder, but the wind chill values won't be as bad in town. Most of these numbers won't look as bad on the screen where most of the records are kept. Though some of them are still kept at Roy Ridge, like Cecil Field and the like. Give or take, some of those type of spots that similarly match our numbers when we're colder than everybody else. They're same as us, but this morning we're the same, as right in town everywhere. I mean, Orlando's not that much warmer than us. It's very unusual. Some of the coldest air they've seen in decades in general. I know this, as we're looking and as we're tracking things here, right there, we'll have to see because the record numbers haven't officially come out yet. We'll have to see what we get in terms of is it the coldest since 89 or 85 or whatever, or is it just in 2010 or, but it's still some of the coldest air in years, decades and the like downstate. Up here, some of these, we're arrival more 22, but some of this is 2010. These wind chill values that I've shown you though, those are, we don't always keep the record of all that here in the weather community, but these are some of the coldest we've seen in a long time to get some single digit numbers on here. That's for sure. That is extreme. So that's the storyline right now. I see folks like Becky, viewer there, watching on YouTube as well. Appreciate everybody tuning in, trusting me. We're 22.5, so I think we're starting to barely inch up here toward that, now that rounds up to 23. So we'll take what we can get here this morning with this very chilly air in play. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much for trusting me here. We have cloudweather.com. That says you some different things there as well. Let me switch back to the actual air temperatures as I'm wrapping up here. But, you see what's going on and, we're broadening it out. Actually have lightning there on the coastal waters way off of North Carolina, Virginia. That's kind of crazy, but that's how it is out there. And, yeah, Bermuda sitting in the 70s. I mean, the Keys this morning, I was looking at it before I came on. They're actually, they're not doing too bad there. But the rest of the state, even the northern part of it at Key Largo, they're not doing so good. 39, but the rest of the Keys, we're talking about Key West and the like. At least they're not doing too bad. I guess that's where you had to go in Florida to get away from all this. It's crazily, or if that's even a word, I'm not sure because we've, been on for a while talking about this and so early, but, just crazy, cold air. So thanks for tuning in. Stay warm today. And that's going to wrap it up for now for this special report. Stay safe out there. I'm meteorologist Casey Cloud here in the Weather Center. See almost 32,000 customers in the dark in the state, which is not good. I know there's a lot of folks in the state of Florida on that, like almost 11 million that are, are kept track of there by the Parity.us information. But, it's still not fun to have, even if it's a really small percentage, it's still a lot. Customer, you multiply that number like by 2 or 3. I mean, it could be more than that, in some cases. And that's not what you want to see, obviously. So that's the storyline right now. Thanks for tuning in, trusting me. Still at 22.5. We're hoping that number goes up. It should here pretty soon. Thanks for tuning in. Again, stay safe, everybody, and stay warm. This cold air here in 2026, wrapping up January now, starting off. Early February was just, extremely, extremely chilly air.